After battering the Bahamas for days and causing catastrophic damage, Dorian has been downgraded to a Category 2 storm, but millions of people are still under evacuation orders. CBS in LA's Hermela Aragawi is in the Satellite Center with the very latest on this deadly storm. Hermela.
Yeah, DeMarco, it's now moving towards the U.S. Hurricane Dorian is starting to show itself through rough waves and dark skies at Jensen Beach in Florida. An estimated 4 million people had been ordered to evacuate from Florida to North Carolina. But power crews are hunkering down at the Daytona Speedway. 5,000 of them are parked waiting to repair damage Dorian is expected to bring. Dorian now moves towards the U.S. after wreaking unprecedented havoc in the Bahamas. The hurricane damaged or destroyed thousands of homes there and is being blamed for at least 5 deaths.
Our mission and focus now is search, rescue, and recovery.
Dorian is now the second most powerful storm ever recorded. Dorian is expected to make landfall along the East Coast later today, and we will have updates throughout the day in our newscast and streaming on CBSN Los Angeles.
This morning, states of emergency have been declared in 5 U.S. states. Joining me now from Satellite Beach in Florida is Jacqueline Whittall. She's a meteorologist with the Weather Network. Jacqueline, the hurricane has now been downgraded to a Category 3. What does that really mean?
Well, there's two crucial things that are going on this morning. One being that downgrade in terms of central pressure and wind speed, like you mentioned. The other big part of this is it's starting to take that turn to the northwest, which is great news, if there's any great news to be had for the Bahamas. It's finally going to be moving that eye wall, which is the most destructive part of the hurricane that's been stalled over Grand Bahama Island. It'll finally be moving off the island. That doesn't mean they're still not going to be getting heavy rain and still getting, Cat 2, Cat 1 and tropical storm strength winds as it continued to move offshore. But at least the worst of it is now finally moving after that just absolutely devastating, horrendous forecast that I might add stalled that actually ended up verifying.
What caused this storm to stall? At one point, it was moving 1 mile per hour.
Yeah, and some of the updates we were reading, too, from the NHC was literally stationary. Like, I've never seen just the word stationary. So this is kind of an unprecedented storm in that, one thing, we don't tend to get Cat 5s that close to the southeast coast just sort of stalling out. The models did a fantastic job at picking this up. Fortunately, a very horrible outcome for the Bahamas. So what that is a lack of steering flow. So we look at winds in our atmosphere from different parts of the Caribbean, of the the Western Atlantic, in the Gulf of Mexico, and even dips in our jet stream through the Midwest United States, the east side of the United States. All those winds that are happening in the upper levels of the atmosphere are what is responsible for taking this and steering it out of the way. Unfortunately, we had pretty much a stall out, and those winds were so weak, so it just stalled. Finally, we're starting to see what we call a trough. And that's just a ribbon of air that's going to finally take it and kick it up the eastern seaboard of Florida. Great news that it's finally going to be moving, but we've got a lot of impacts that's still yet to, be had here in Florida. So, speaking to locals here, they're prepared and they're certainly going to get a lot less in the way of impact, but there still is going to be impact. 4 to 7 foot storm surge is possible here. Heavy rains are a possibility here, and even Cat 1 wind gusts are possible too.
Okay, so you mentioned that this storm, if you're in Florida, it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. A lot of people are going to be breathing a sigh of relief. But is it possible, Jacqueline, that it could still shimmy over more westward and then cause the kind of problems that we were anticipating a couple of days ago?
Excellent question. I highly doubt that. Our models now are getting really close to finding the solution that will be real. So when we're looking 48 hours in advance and 72 hours out in advance, and this was, we're going back to Saturday morning, we're going back to Friday, we really didn't know how this would play out. But now the model, all the models have had data from the storm, from those hurricane recon missions ingested into those models, which means we can find almost a perfect solution. So all the models are coming together now in agreement. It does show that that center of circulation is going to stay offshore Florida by a long shot, 50, maybe more miles offshore. But even with that, this is the best analog. We look back in history to find storms that are very similar to this. The best analog that we can find is a storm I actually was here to chase in 2016 called Hurricane Matthew. And that storm took a very similar path. You can almost lay those National Hurricane Center cones of uncertainty over each other. They're almost a mimic. So what that meant was major flooding for Daytona Beach with storm surge. We had heavy rain. We did have Category 1 hurricane gusts. So there were still impacts. We're still going to see power outages potentially. And but yes, the worst of it will be staying offshore. As far as imminent landfall for the rest of the southeast U.S., we still have to watch Georgia, South Carolina, and even the Canadian Maritimes.
All right, Jacqueline Woodall, she's a meteorologist with the Weather Network.
You're living a live storm trackers committed to keeping your family safe, and we are looking at Dorian that is going to be moving in the direction of the Georgia and the Carolina coastline, scooting along the coast of Florida. A Cat 2 storm right now, and as of the 1 p.m. advisory, showing that it is finally starting to make that move to the northwest at 3 miles per hour. And you can see still a fairly well-formed storm, even though it has lost some of its complete symmetry. The eye wall hasn't, though, and that eye wall finally starting to make that move. Right now, it's about 74 miles east of Fort Pierce, so east of the Florida coastline. And as we zoom in here to Grand Bahama, you can see finally, in the last few radar frames, that eye wall is starting to make that move, that curve, that turn we've been talking about for days now. So here is where the tropical storm force winds are right now along the Florida coastline. You can see that it is expected to scoot to the north or move to the north, picking up its speed a bit. And we're expecting to see those tropical storm force winds along the coast of Georgia, so Brunswick on up into Savannah. As we head into Wednesday night, we'll certainly be watching for that. And then it continues that northerly path, northeasterly path into Charleston and Wilmington, bringing in tropical storm force winds. It should have Category 2 force winds at that point, up around 100 miles per hour. As it moves to the north near Norfolk, they'll see similar conditions. And then this one a little different from Matthew, although I think this track is very similar. This one should continue its movement off to the northeast and finally die out somewhere over Nova Scotia as we head towards the weekend. Spaghetti models, they are in agreement. That gives us good confidence that this storm is going to continue on that Matthew-like track and then continue off into the northern Atlantic. Heavy rain still expected here, though, along our coastline, along the Florida coast, 3 to 4 inches. Along the Georgia coast, we could see 4 to 5 inches, and into the South Carolina coast we go with 10 to maybe even 12 inches in some spots in the extreme coastal regions of South Carolina and North Carolina and Virginia. Just north of Charleston, they could see some very heavy rain and a big storm surge as that circulation, that counterclockwise circulation, pushes that water inland there in Charleston. And nowhere for that water to go with all those rivers and inlets that drain into the sea. Hurricane reconnaissance still showing those winds in the upper levels of the storm up around 125 miles per hour at this point. And we are looking at this long-term model. This is our RPM model showing a frontal system moving in. This is actually going to help direct Dorian to the north and keep it on its northeasterly path. It's not a very strong front for us. We're still going to be hot here, but it will help direct the hurricane. Hurricanes like to follow the path of least resistance, so we do anticipate it helping to push it on up the coastline. We'll have the latest update at 2 o'clock coming from the National Hurricane Center. We'll keep you covered then. We'll talk to you later.
Nope.